Hello and good morning and welcome to the fourth installment of our Innovators in Education series. We're here in the North Green Screen Studios as always. Today's episode is brought to you by the Nord Family Foundation and a very generous grant we got from them to collect some of the great things happening in education around Ohio and the country. If you've never watched one of these before, it's pretty simple. It's kind of a conversation built around the great things happening in classrooms. We want you to take what you learned here and actually go back to your classrooms and use this, or go back to your building or your district. We've been able to talk to some great people, and the same case is for today. And we are here with Scott Kinkoph from Brecksville-Broadview Heights Schools. Scott's a technology teacher, so he is teaching kids in the classroom, but he's also a tech mentor / tech coach, so he works with the adults and the other teachers in the district as well. He's created a self-paced, gradeless classroom that he uses with his students, so we're going to talk about that, and then we'll also talk about his work with other educators getting ready for a big one-to-one rollout in their district. And I will let Scott fill in any of the other details. So good morning, Scott, and I appreciate you coming in today to the studio.
Thanks for having me.
And you made it here okay?
I made it here just fine.
Which is always good. So did I miss anything important about you?
Not really.
Not really. How many years have you been in education, I guess?
Well, I'm actually finishing my 18th year this year. So
wow.
This is my third year being in tech integration in the school district. So my work is with grades 3 through 8 and helping with a lot of different projects actually. So working with iPads, we work with our Lenovo netbooks, but it's a lot of fun working with many different teachers and a lot of different kids.
And how long have you been in Brecksville-Broadview Heights?
18 years.
Oh, okay, so your whole career.
Yes, I was hired there, yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
I was hired there.
Always tech teacher with kids?
No, actually, it was 13 years as a fourth grade teacher to begin with. So lots of experience working with students in the lower grade levels, and then some of the big buzzwords with differentiation and response intervention and those kinds of things. So that has really, really helped me differentiate with technology and being able to see where things fit. So my first 13 years were in fourth grade, and then my last 6 or 7 years has been up in the up at the middle school in Brecksville. Yeah. And
then just so we can get a clear picture here as we start talking, what does technology look like in Brecksville-Broadview Heights now? Can I just call it Brecksville just to make it shorter? I don't want to offend Broadview Heights.
No, we really need to call it Brecksville-Broadview Heights.
Okay, good. I'm sorry. See?
Yeah.
You got to watch.
Yeah. So,
I'm a Willoughby Eastlake guy.
So what is technology like in Brecksville-Broadview Heights now? Is
there what kind of device coverage do you have? The one-to-one program I mentioned in the intro, where, if you want to kind of intro that.
We started about 3 years ago where there was curricular adoptions in the middle school, and so our curriculum director, Dr. Carla Kalovic, she went ahead and started purchasing netbooks and carts for those curriculum purchases in the middle school first. And then from there, it's kind of branched out. So we went up to the high school with a few netbooks and carts, but primarily have moved downward. So next year, all 4th and 5th graders will have access to a device. All of our 3rd graders have access to a Lenovo Windows machine. Our 2nd graders have access to Windows Lenovo, along with iPads, and then I believe our 1st graders are all going to get iPads. So we have a lot of our students have access to a lot of different technology. Okay. Yeah.
But next year will be the first time where it's actually given to the student.
Right. So next year in 6th grade, all students coming from 5th to 6th will get their own Chromebook. That Chromebook will come with some sort of carrying case, and in a one-to-one, what makes it different than what we're doing now is that students actually take that Chromebook with them wherever they go to every single class and take it home to do their work.
That'll be pretty cool.
It would be very cool.
That'll be good.
So kids are looking forward to it.
Well, that's a good thing too. And let's really focus in on the kids here first before we talk about adults and how we do this. So one of your last blog posts, I hope you remember writing it, you used a term that I really like, so we're going to coin it, because I love to coin educational terms. But you referred to him as the next learner. What's the title? Look, he's like, yes, I remember writing that.
I do remember writing that.
Let's talk about, what do you mean about the next learner? Or what is that term?
The term the next learner is interesting because right now we have, in education, I believe we have a set of learners, but our students really need a new set of skills going forward, not only to interact with each other and with teachers, but with the world. But that also includes what's commonly known as 21st century skills, although those really don't have anything to do with time. It has more to do with how do we have students use critical thinking, how do we have them use their skills of creativity and collaboration to further their learning beyond what can happen with an educator in the classroom or with the student just being in the classroom. So the next learner really has little to do with being a learner. It has to do with what are the next big steps we can help cultivate within our students so they become rich, deep learners and always being able to learn over the time, no matter what device is in front of them or
yeah, because we know that'll change. We've seen it change. So like I said, 18 years ago you started and there probably wasn't much tech.
Yeah, I mean,
you couldn't have been a tech teacher.
For instance, in my classroom in 4th grade, there was one computer.
Yeah.
And it was, at that time, it was the old iMacs. So the
one with the handle in the top?
Yeah, with the bright blue ones, right? With the 10-inch screen, whatever that was. And then we transitioned into PCs in our district. But,
cool. Yeah. So another important term that I love to get people's opinion on or kind of definition of before we start talking about moving away from grades is we're going to talk about grades and we're going to talk about learning. What does it mean to you when a student learns something? I mean, what is that? Learning is such an ambiguous term.
Right.
See, the questions are hard today.
Yes, I know. Which I prefer hard questions than easy ones. Learning is the act of taking something and I think gathering some information about it and then creating something new. That something new may help to remix or add on to an idea that's already in place. But learning itself means I've taken some body of knowledge here and added on to it so that if we were doing something like we are now in a discussion, I can carry on a relevant discussion, or I can write a blog post, or I can tweet about it, or I could put something on social media, or I can go home to my parents. For instance, my daughter the other day comes home to me, she's 4, and she says, "Daddy," I said, "What?" She goes, "There are liquids." And I said, "Yes, you're right." And so that's learning. She never knew, she knew water was water.
But she didn't know
but
that
she
it
had
was
no
something
idea
else.
what the name of that thing was until she comes home and says, "Daddy, that's a liquid." And she repeated this to my wife and I, like for the next 5 or 10 minutes.
Or mind's blown. Like, what is this new word?
Exactly. Yeah. And so she wants to use it. So that's learning. She knew that there was this substance and didn't, other than water, you know, can she have water? Now she calls it a liquid.
Can I have a liquid?
Right. And she went on to talk about a liquid.
But it's an active process, I guess.
Always, because, okay, in traditional classrooms, the learning process is typically passive. Mm-hmm. Kids sit, they take notes, the teacher tells them to take notes, the teacher might say fill in the worksheet, and so there's nothing really going on. They're not really doing anything to digest the information. So learning is an active process in which the person is, or the student or the person is taking all of these things and working them together simultaneously to try and figure out what it means to them and then how to produce that in a way that other people can understand.
Okay, cool. So if we're going to talk about learning, whether it's passive or whether it's a very active process like it should be, we always have to look at how do we know learning's happening? And in the traditional sense of things, we have grades, which are usually attached to standardized tests. I'll never mention those again during the interview. But you have moved away from grades.
Yes, I have.
Which is something that I think is a trend people are attempting to get into and use.
Yes.
They don't know where to go with it. It's like STEM. STEM's great, but there's very few organizations that you can say, how do I get resources about this? So what is your personal philosophy on grades, just to begin with? Why did you start down this path of not using grades?
It was either 2 or 3 years ago. I went to a gifted conference in Virginia, and at the time I was teaching accelerated language arts.
Okay.
And so I sat in this session where one of the gifted teachers from some district had talked about how rather than grading students, they work their students along a progression of understanding. So from novice to emerging to proficient to advanced or skilled or whatever it is, whatever
it's
those,
like teachers are graded that way.
Yeah. Now this was a few years ago before Ohio ever came out with their grading system.
Sure.
But the point was that really made a lot of sense to me, that if I want students to learn, it's not about the points that I give them. It's really about the feedback, the descriptions, the interactions that I'm having with them either in person or online giving them on how to improve their work over time. And what I've seen is in my classes in 6th grade, since I've done away with grades, and the way that I work my classes on the first day, I explain to students how it's going to work. I say, kids, you've already passed the class. And they look at me, jaws hit the floor, all smiles, because they're thinking they don't have to do anything.
I don't have to do anything. I made it, yeah.
But I said, and so what'll happen is in progress book, I will give you a point, a single point for the projects that you complete over the 12 weeks that you're with me, and they usually complete 5 to 6 of these.
Okay.
I said, but you will work really, really hard to get that 1 point.
Sure.
And to this day, students never ask me, is it for a grade? Is it formative? Is it summative? My students come into my classroom knowing that it's not about the points, it's about the active process of learning and doing.
Sure.
And so what I've started doing, and actually what you saw this morning is on Twitter, I put out what the kids are supposed to do and hashtag with Mr. K's class. They go check the hashtag, they see what they have to do, and they start. I spend 0 time up front.
6th graders, right?
Sixth graders.
Okay, cool.
I spend 0 time up front actually having to teach anything.
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time sitting and mentoring kids side by side, so if they need certain skills, I go and address those. But by and large, what I'm finding is that students don't need the point or the points or the amount of points to do the work. They really don't care about that. They're really digging into all this work all by themselves. And it's really amazing to see them get really excited about their own work and do really, really, really well at it.
So logistically, you mentioned Progress Book, which if you don't know, that's in Ohio we have to use, or most schools use a grade program.
Right.
There's no real way in any of those programs to differentiate how you grade. It's a very...
There could be.
There could be.
But it's not...
It's a ton of work.
Yeah, right. It's not really easy to make that work.
So that's a good logistical point that, you got to overcome what the district looks like. How did you start this with a conversation with your building administration or who's ever in charge of, Scott, you have to have points, or Scott, parents expect a grade?
I knew that I had to have points. I knew that parents expected to see a grade. Did I go to my building administrator and say, this is what I'm doing? I did not. I have talked to, since then, a few building administrators about what I do, and none of them seem concerned about it.
That's good.
And maybe that's because it's a technology class, and so there's not a lot, quote unquote, like riding on it.
Yeah.
But in the end, the principals, if they want to go and see what I'm doing, they're more than welcome to ask me, but I didn't per se go ask for permission to do it. I knew this was in the best interest of my students, so I went ahead and went forward with it.
And it seems to be working.
Yeah, students have 0 problems.
Are grades ever appropriate? Do you think there's a place for, look at this, this is weird. Do you think there's ever a place for grades with a student, an A, B, C, or D?
The real question that you're asking is can we measure learning?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So can a letter measure learning?
Or generalize that measurement, I guess.
Right.
Should all our kids be generalized?
Can a 10 points on a handout measure learning? My response to that is no. I really do not believe that learning is measured either in letters or numbers. I think learning is captured when there's discourse between student and teacher.
Okay.
So that when something is given to me and I can see what the students have done, then I can talk to them about it and I can see where they've gone from this point to this point. So by giving a student a letter grade, in most contexts, parents like to see the A or the B.
Yeah, that's what we're used to.
Right, but in the end, does that really capture what students have learned? And my response to that is no, I don't think that does that efficiently nor effectively.
So what do you see in your building or in your students? Because they come to your classroom for 40 minutes, however long you have them,
right.
And they have this very dynamic kind of space to learn and create. And then they go back to the traditional world of school. And I don't mean to slight other teachers, but I don't think their whole day is gradeless or workflow like that. So how does that translate for good and bad towards you as a teacher in the classroom and towards your kids, I guess, your kids' philosophy of their day?
Right now, I'm spending a good portion of what I do, and as a technology integrator, not only do I teach, I work with teachers, but talking to them about the meaning of grades and how we go about giving feedback to students. What I'm finding is that as teachers start to see the relevance of giving descriptive feedback and giving less grades, and as they're trying to work with this in their classrooms, students are buying it.
Okay.
Now, is every teacher doing that? No.
Sure.
But in the end, what I know is that students come into my classroom and they'll tell me my class is fun, which is one of the two major goals of education, is success and fun. So if they're having fun, they're going to succeed.
Sure.
And when they leave, I can tell that some of those other learning experiences in the other classes just aren't as relevant to them because they're being forced into doing something that to them doesn't matter. For instance, I was working with in a math classroom, and the kids had to find the area. The area of a cube. Okay. In fractions.
That sounds hard. I'm just saying.
And as I'm working with this with students, what I'm realizing is well, why do they even have to know this? For instance, if you say, let me go to UPS and ship something,
yeah,
I don't really care how many cubic centimeters are in that box.
It's a weight thing, right? Yeah.
Well, it's not only a weight thing, but the only question I really want to answer is does my thing fit in that box?
Yeah, oh, I'd say yeah. We'll let
and
even go in there.
If it fits in that box, I'm good. I don't care.
Move on. Yeah.
Right. And so if I have to have a few like packing peanuts or whatever inside of it, so it doesn't shimmy around, but really isn't that the point? And so when I went and I talked to the teacher about this, I said, so why should students even have to do this? And she says to me, she goes, yeah, I know. Like, why in the world are we doing this when it has no real world application over here? And in that case, the students themselves are probably thinking, why am I having to do this, other than the fact that my teacher told me I had to.
Yeah.
So I think as we start to get through some of these more difficult conversations about what does grading mean and how is that translated and what does it mean to parents, and most importantly, what does it mean to student, transitioning away from letters and numbers to description, to discussion, to some sort of growth over time is much more important than saying, I got an A on our report card.
And that's a big jump. I mean,
huge jump.
We're by no means saying that you're going to go back to your classrooms tomorrow. Like, I'm gradeless. Look at what I'm doing.
Right. And it was and I don't want to give the impression that I did this like overnight. This wasn't an overnight thing. I did have to come to the realization as an educator that after years of being in the profession, that the better way to do it was to find a better way to do it. And of course, I needed some sort of stimulus to make that happen, and that happened to be that gifted conference that I was at. But after the gifted conference, everything shifted. And so not only did I shift how I look at grades, but then shifting how I actually taught. So I went from very regimented assignments to things like project-based learning. Yeah. And giving kids, giving my students like to work through projects over time versus do it now, and those kinds of things.
Which is a great lead into my next question. You're amazing. Make my job so easy. What role does choice play in a classroom? And not just choice as an assessment, but just choice overall of this is what you need to learn or need to show me that you know, go do it. I mean, what does that process look like? Because you don't do the same project for each student, correct?
No. In fact, I designed a wiki. Let me start over. I actually was using Schoology for a while to deliver the projects that students should be choosing from. Okay. And then I listened to a friend, Garth Holman, who said that Schoology was...
He's that old guy, I know.
Yeah, right. He is old. He's skinny, but he's old. Right? And he's a runner. Anyhow, we'll move on. He said, Schoology is a closed environment, and nobody can peer into that but the student, and if you give parents access. Which made me think, well, if I really want people to see what my students are doing, then I should open this up. So I decided to change it to a wiki. Okay. And I want students to learn a variety of technology skills, which include things like animated GIFs and painting and drawing and video and those kinds of things. Sure. So I set it up with an original 8 projects that students could choose from any of the 8. Okay. And then what I did to students, I said, hey, look, these are the 8 that I have. What do you think? So we did this whole brainstorming session, and students came up with another set of projects that they wanted to complete to give them voice in the classroom. So it's not only about choice, it's also about voice.
Okay.
And they said that these were the ones that they wanted, to try. So I wrote out the whole learning thing for them. But essentially, when students come into class, they go to a wiki, they see the 11 projects, they can pick any of the 11. I say to them at the beginning of the 12 weeks, how many do you think is fair to complete? We banter back and forth. We usually arrive at some sort of consensus, about 5 or 6.
Okay.
They go and do their 5 or 6, and you may say, well, what happens if the student doesn't like that project? Stop it. Go pick a new one.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you're gonna be self-absorbed in something for quite a while, you might as well like it. And
Yeah,
if you
sure.
don't like it, you might as well go and
Cut your losses and do something
try
better.
something
Yeah.
else. So choice plays a really important role because students start to realize it's not just about what the teacher's telling me, it's about what I want to invest my time into. And even though that the teacher's saying that these are the 11, I still have choice in that and can still demonstrate my learning in that way.
How hard was it to get students to make a choice? I mean, because they're not, I taught 7th grade and I got very used to kids not understanding what that meant when you said, well, go do whatever you want. And
Right.
that's a hard thing for a student to understand.
Right.
How did you tackle that? Was it a problem?
They don't have a problem with choosing their projects.
Okay.
What I did find, which I actually had to redo an entire 12 weeks worth of work in a couple of days, was redesigning the learning so that they had more structure to it. So even though I say go learn it,
Yeah.
I'm still providing them steps and structure
Okay.
so that they can go from one thing to another in a logical fashion. And what I found is that at the beginning of the year, when I kind of said, here's a general guideline for learning this, they really had a lot of difficulty. Now that I've redesigned it, my 3rd iteration of it, they go in, they see the steps that they have to do, and boom, 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 boom. There's literally 0 questions from students. They go in, they do it, they know what they have to do. Like I said earlier, we were talking, they come into class and they just get started because
Yeah.
they already know what to do.
So if we're not using grades, if it's this active process of kind of working through projects of their choice, how are you measuring that learning? Like, what does that look like?
For every project, there are learning targets.
Okay.
It could be 2 or 3, depending on the project. It could be 8 or 9. It just really depends on the depth of the project that they choose. So what I did was I created a Google template. It's a doc.
Okay.
And what they do is that they copy and paste all of the learning targets into the Google Doc, and before they ever do anything, they rate their learning proficiency on a scale of 1 to 4. 1 meaning I'm not really proficient at, 4 meaning I'm really awesome, And so then after they do that, then they go through all the steps of their learning, and then they come back to the Google Doc and they re-rate themselves.
Okay.
So it does a couple things. Not only do they have to re-rate themselves on a scale of 1 to 4, going up on almost every level, but then they also have to justify it, so they have to reflect.
Okay.
And reflection is one of those really difficult
Yeah,
things.
it
And
is.
you know, as a 7th grade teacher, what that was like,
Sure.
especially I'm sure in social studies, like, reflect on, and the kids are like,
Huh.
so what my students are doing, and not only are they thinking about their learning before it even takes place, and then rating themselves on their learning afterwards, kind of grading themselves, so to speak, but they're also reflecting on how they learned that. And when they're done writing that whole document up, then they share it with me. And I spend, 10, 20 minutes reading through all of that. And then I make comments on those things back to students
Okay.
in the doc. So now I have this collaborative
Sure.
thing going on.
Yeah, it's a good back and forth.
Right, back and forth. And so I send it back to the students, and they go back and they make the adjustments in their learning, so that not only have they completed this full sequence of learning, but now I'm also extending it. So
Yep.
asking them to rethink about all the things that perhaps they didn't get on the front end, and then to make adjustments. And I have 0 students ever complain about that. No student has ever said to me, Mike, I'm not, or Mr. K, sorry. Mr. K, you know what? Sorry, you're my teacher. Well, you are Professor Mike.
That's right.
Anyways, no student ever says, Mr. K, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
They never say it. They
Well,
go back and they do it.
Yeah.
And they know that when they give it back to me, they say, okay, I made these adjustments. What do you think now? So there's this amazing exchange that happens when you release the consequence of a point system, of a letter system. You give them choice and you give them voice.
Yep. Yep.
They're more than willing to go and do all the things we always want them to do as educators, But you have to really be willing to release all of that and let that go in favor of letting students dig in, get active, and then prove their learning. It's really
That's
just an
cool.
amazing thing to see.
Yeah, students are very used to when they hit the grade that they want or that they think they usually get in a class
Yeah.
of stopping.
Yeah.
Like I used the grade grubbers, for lack of a better term. But my gifted kids always wanted a 98% instead of a 97. But
Right.
that was always their goal. It wasn't the learning, it was that number on
Right.
a piece of paper,
Right.
Which is always interesting to me. So that sounds like a lot of work and a ton of reflection and back and forth. So I think it's important to clarify that you are saving a ton of time by not being in front of your class
Yes.
20 to 40 minutes a day lecturing.
Yes.
So that time is filled with, I imagine if I walk in your classroom, you're going to have kids doing all kinds of different things, and you're going to be either walking around working with them or reading their docs and doing that,
Right.
that piece, which I think is a big scary part for teachers too.
Yes.
How weird was it when you stopped being the person in front of the classroom?
It took a little adjustment because I always felt like I had to be in front.
Yeah.
So maybe the first semester or so was really difficult because I wasn't standing in front and talking. Just a little aside, I did some standing and talking in front of students the other day for a platform called ThingLink, and if you don't know about ThingLink,
It's pretty good.
ThingLink
I
is
like
awesome.
ThingLink, yeah.
Love ThingLink. So I started showing my students something about ThingLinks, and you know what happened? It happens in every other class you've ever been in once you start to talk. Eyes glaze over, they stop listening, they start talking to each other.
Yeah.
And I was only up there for five whole minutes.
You're so engaging.
I know, and that was the sad thing, right?
Yeah.
I think of this really engaging person who talks in front of kids, and
But they don't want to sit and
they
listen.
don't. They were, they're so used to coming in and working that when
Yep.
I actually started to stand and talk, they completely tuned me out.
And it's funny to aside to that, but I've noticed over time, I came to the realization that when we used to say by just putting things on a screen and making it digital, we would engage kids because kids love tech.
Right.
But any TV show, anything else you watch, there are constantly Twitter hashtags at the bottom, Instagram places to follow.
Right.
And if you were to walk into a normal, typical household these days, those kids are actually doing 10 other things while they're watching a
Yes.
show. So that
Yes.
model doesn't even work anymore. And that's only a couple years old, that idea of, well, a smart board, because now
Right.
there's things moving in a digital world.
Right.
So that it's interesting to hear that. 5 minutes, that's all I can think of, Scott.
5 minutes, I tried, and their eyes glazed over.
Yeah.
And I knew at that point, honestly, you just have to shut up and sit down because they're ready to go.
Yep.
They see it, they know it, they're like, okay, I got this, and go.
I'll go figure it out for myself.
Yeah.
And
And
kids
that-
aren't afraid to push buttons and break things.
No, well, but isn't that really a large part of wonderment and learning?
Oh, yeah.
I have a 7 and a 4-year-old, and they just love to do. I mean, they love to push things and ask questions. Why?
Yep.
Because the wonderment is what's so exciting to them because they want to see.
Yeah.
And the kids today, like in my tech classes, like just let me go and see what this thing does. You don't have to teach me about it. Just so what
Yes.
do? I kind of stop in and check how things are going and give directions as I need to. That's about it.
So the ultimate scary switch here in conversation, you also work with adults.
I do.
Teachers, not adults, teachers.
Teachers,
There's a difference.
yeah.
We all know we're different. So you're a tech teacher, you're a tech coach, you're going one-to-one. The reason that you're in front of those teachers or in their classroom is because of the technology. But
Yes.
what does PD really look like the way that you successfully do it? Don't tell me about the non-successful stuff.
Okay. I think before I ever get into an answer about how PD is successful, I should probably explain my point of view on being a tech integrator, and that is I first have to be a very strong pedagogist. If I don't understand how to teach and the way to deliver instruction and to sequence instruction and differentiate and do all of those things, I cannot help a teacher. I could walk in as an tech integrator and say, okay, use this app or use this website and go.
Yeah.
What I spend the most of my time doing, though, is really talking to teachers about what are your standards, what are your learning targets, why are your learning targets this, spending more time talking to them about teaching and learning than the actual tech.
Yeah.
So in that respect, I've built a rapport with the teachers I'm working with now to give PD so that they understand that it's not about technology, it's really about how do we get kids to learn. So
An app's not going to save your class.
no.
Good curriculum is.
Right. Good instruction.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't engage a student in learning if the pedagogy is poor.
Yep.
For instance, if you're always giving kid a worksheet, that's not it's just not engaging to them.
Yeah.
As much as it is to stand and give lecture, to take notes. So I do work with teachers right now frequently for PD, and we are moving to a one-to-one in 6th grade in Brecksville-Broadview Heights and adopting the phrase blended learning so that when our teachers come in next school year, not only are they engaging students in really good pedagogical practices, but they're also using the Chromebooks that students are going to be getting. Many teachers are used to what is called sit and get. So I come in, I sit down, whoever the instructor is, in this case me, would tell teachers how to use ThinkLink.
Sure.
And so they'd sit there and they'd play with it, and there's never interaction between teacher and student or student and student. So what I've done is I've flipped that. I've decided that, and I do this all the time, that they're by and large going to do the work. So just like with my students, I design all the learning up front, and then I put the teachers in the PD with all the learning that they have to do. They go into it just like my students do. They read through it with the things that they have to do. They interact with each other. I give them the activities. Within all of those activities, I embed the tech. And then, so what do? As the guy giving the PD, I do exactly what I do with my students. I walk around.
Okay.
I interact with them. I ask questions. I ask them for reflection. If I see them veering off, bring them back. So I've developed the PD model in our district, at least for the tech side of it. I shouldn't say for anybody else, but at least for the tech side of it, that the teachers are really going to do the work. And they're really going to sit down and discuss and build and create, just like I'm having my students do. And interesting, in one of the first sessions, one of the teachers said to me, "Can't you just tell me what this is?" And my response was, "No, I can't." And I walked away. And I don't think she appreciated that.
Sure.
But in the end, it's about knowing what blended learning is and one-to-one is. If I tell you about it, that's great. But if you've never done anything to digest it,
it's just another
right,
thing
or be active with it. It's just something that you hear. So that's how I go about PD. And in fact, the teachers I'm working with today are doing PD without me even being there. So I designed all of the PD in Schoology.
Yeah.
All they have to do is go in, go through it. They have all the things that they need to do. So in a blended atmosphere, if the educator isn't there, learning still happens.
Yeah.
And some of them are like, "Well, should we even do it?" Yeah. Yes, you should.
Yeah, you should.
Because you don't, it's a great experience. If the instructor isn't there, you can still get through it without having to have every question answered. So
you can be an independent,
an independent learner.
Right? Yeah. And that's interesting because we often forget that our students need to learn how to do it that way, but so do adults, because we're all institutionalized, for lack of educationally institutionalized, to how we do PD and how we do those things.
There was pushback, and in fact, just to go a little farther with this, when I designed the initial instruction, I designed it knowing that the teachers, there were in basically 3 different groups, all in 3 different places. Sounds just like a classroom, right?
Yeah.
So all of your students are in all these different places, and as an educator, I need to differentiate the learning for those students and what they produce. So I did the same thing for our teachers. And interestingly enough, for the one group that I put into what is one-to-one, what is blended learning, the very basic question of what it is, because they didn't know, they said, "We're the dummy group."
They instantly identified themselves.
They instantly said that we are we don't know as much as everybody else, so we must be this group. And what I try to instill in them in modeling the whole thing is that this is differentiation.
Yeah.
This is what you need. In other words, the other groups are getting what they need, and this is what you need, so this is what you're getting.
Yeah.
And they didn't like it. They were very bothered by the fact that they were put into a differentiated group that wasn't as far along. And one of the questions to me was, which is very interesting, is, are we going to get what everybody else is getting? Mm-hmm. I am. Mm-hmm. And I went on to explain that the way I set this up is that it was a modified jigsaw. So the 3 groups of teachers were going to teach each other about all the things that they were learning versus me stand up and talk about it. Right? So the beauty of it was, not only did they have to, we want our kids to do too.
Yep. Yeah, learning is starting at one point and making it to a more progressed point.
Right. And but there was that accountability piece that said that you are producing something for your peers to which they have to learn from you. So you have to know it well enough to be able to do that. And by golly, every one of them did it.
Which is good, but that's another interesting thing is when you tell a teacher that they're going to be responsible to go teach another teacher, we get this strange fear, even though we teach people for a living. That's
Right.
what we do. But
Right.
it's still this odd thing. How do you manage your time during the day between teaching classes, creating PD, keeping up with your teachers, keeping that accountability?
I spend the way I work my day really has nothing to do with my agenda. So let me start there. The way that I work my day is that whatever I need, whatever teachers are asking me for is what I do. So usually I'll have requests here and there to come make visits and to talk to them about certain things. And then if I have time for the things that I need to do, like design the PD, then I'll do that.
Okay.
But usually most of my work that happens, designing PD, happens outside of my day, so that all of my focus is on students and teachers.
Cool.
And I do that way obviously on purpose, so that I'm very clear on who gets the focus and who gets the time. So it's teacher-centered and student-centered versus me-centered, and all happens.
Sure, and then the day happens, and your
Right.
normal life gets in the
Right.
way, and you're pulled in 18
Exactly.
directions. So there's a lot of teachers out there who get supplementals or who become tech coaches or tech integrationists and are also teaching. If someone's new to that position, if they've done it, but it becomes sometimes more of a break-fix scenario or, on-demand tech support,
Right.
what's one good piece of advice that you would give to those tech coaches people to kind of organize PD or to get moving in that right direction?
I would start by asking your staff what it is that they want.
Okay.
I think what we find universally is that when PD is given, it's given with the intent that people want what we're saying, but that's not necessarily what they really need.
Sure.
And so if we reverse that from saying this is what you should know to what do you want to learn, it's much easier that way. So if you have to do some short little PD snippets, ask your staff, what are they interested in? And there's also the phrases, you don't know what you don't know.
Yep.
And so maybe at that point, if you're not getting much feedback, then you go ahead and say, well, then we really should be looking at this particular, piece, something like Kahoot or Zaption or Educanon or whatever, ThingLink, whatever little piece of tech. So certainly start by asking your staff first.
Yep.
And seeing what's there.
Yeah.
Check in with administration, see if they're seeing anything, now that they're doing walkthroughs and all of the conversations with their teachers, what are they seeing that might be needed, and then go from there.
Which is funny because, again, it's the exact same thing you have to do with your students.
Right.
We got to treat adults like kids, and I mean that in the best way possible, because it's a new frontier for everyone.
Right.
And I think so. That's pretty awesome. So I always do the same 5 final questions.
Okay.
So we're going to roll into those here. So what's one thing you would change immediately in education?
Abolish grade levels.
Nice. I like that one. So grade levels, right?
Grade levels. And what's interesting, I had this whole, I don't know when you do your thinking, but sometimes my best thinking happens at 1 or 2 in the morning, and this is when this happened. So maybe about a year or so ago, probably a little longer than that, I'm thinking, what would learning look like if, and I really like the what if question. So what if kids got into a grade level and they accomplished all of the standards by mid-year, right? They learned them all, they proved them all.
Yeah. Then what?
So shouldn't that kid just be able to move up, right? Like leveling up?
Oh yeah.
So if we could get rid of the lockstep, I have to go to first grade and then second grade and then third grade, couldn't it be where students started school with a set of teachers who then start teaching the standards, and as those kids started to either accelerate or they needed intervention, but certainly the kids who were accelerating then got a chance to move farther faster. The kids who needed intervention still get what they need, but by the end of a school year, let's keep that a loose term,
Like a calendar year,
whatever that might be, all of those students would still move on to the next level of learning versus I go to second. So you could really remove the whole idea of certainly there are always going to be gifted individuals. There are going to be individuals who are going to need more time to learn it better. Mm-hmm. But you might be able to lose a lot of those labels.
Well, it'd be true universal design.
Right.
Because every student would be doing what they needed.
To go forward faster.
And a lot of teachers, I think, will find when they do project-based learning or student choice learning and they move away from grades, eventually those kids get to a point where there's almost nothing more you can do with them. Like, oh, they mastered 7th grade, so do I do U.S. world history or U.S. history? What's that next step?
You know, earlier we were talking about Periscope, and
Periscope.
Ryan, Periscope's great, but Ryan, he's the principal in Ohio. What's his last name?
Ryan. Are you talking about Toby?
No.
I don't know Ryan. Where's he principal?
Somewhere south. Anyways.
Somewhere south of Cleveland.
Hi,
Ryan.
Hi, Ryan. He did this Periscope where he walked into a math class at the middle school, and he said in Periscope, the teacher has set it up so that his students move along a mastery-based continuum. What we've been taught, this whole idea of getting rid of grades and mastery versus having to prove points and grades. He said that there was a student in this math class. It was the end of the 3rd quarter, had mastered all of the standards and all the learning targets.
Jeez.
So right there, we already have proof that this is doable.
That student needs somewhere else to go.
But the second thing this kid did is that he remixed Apple's Genius Bar to be a Math Genius Bar.
Nice.
So that if the kids who were struggling could come up to the Math Genius Bar and get extra help, and the teacher doesn't.
So he became a peer tutor because he had extra time.
Peer-to-peer teaching.
Yeah.
But just the creativity alone to put that into place.
Oh yeah.
So really, if we look at getting rid of grades, I mean, the kid could go on to start 8th grade math or 7th grade math, whatever it was. Obviously, that wasn't in the plan, so he decided that I want to try this.
Sure.
And so he's going to start to deepen his other students, his peers' understanding
awesome.
of math. Yeah, that's pretty sweet.
I had no problem getting rid of grades. So how about, what's one thing that you would keep the same? What works? There's got to be something.
Kids.
Yeah.
Let kids be kids. One of the things I really enjoy most about my class is when kids just come in and they kind of act like themselves. And they don't sit and hunker, and they don't wait for somebody to tell them what to do, and they're not silent. They come in, they interact, they talk, they believe in something that they're doing, and just letting kids just be free without always having to control them. Just let them be kids, because it's really, really fun when they are.
I know, kids are crazy. Some people claim I am one.
As am I.
One long-term goal, career goal. So by the time you stop teaching when you're 85 or whatever it's going to be in Ohio, by the time we get old.
I would really like to be in a position of curriculum and development.
Okay.
I really enjoy looking at how do we take this piece of learning and then how do we develop that into something that's rich and beneficial and engaging for students. So over time, while I am a tech integrator now, I do see myself perhaps somewhere down the line maybe getting the administrator's license and then getting into a system where curriculum and development, is completely new and different and changing that.
Yeah.
So we get away from perhaps all the textbooks, all of those things, and getting into something that's real and engaging for the kids. Yeah.
That's pretty long term.
Yeah,
Huge.
it is long term.
So what's something to bring it back in? What's one goal? And I know it's May almost.
Right.
What's one goal by the end of the year, or something that you've been working towards, I guess, for this year?
I really want to know how well my students are progressing in their classes, or at least in my class. So what that means is that keeping up with them in their work and their learning targets and their reflections. A secondary then to that is getting our teachers excited about being in a one-to-one, providing more relevant learning experiences for our students, using a computer and using new techniques for teaching and learning.
Cool.
So,
yeah, it's going to be a big jump. It's pretty cool.
Right, a dual role because I teach and then I'm also the tech integrator. So yeah.
And best day of your career so far?
This happens to be one of them.
You only get one. People. You got teachers.
So, but the other best day of my life is when I had a group of special ed students come to me who have some severe learning difficulties, and engaging them and talking to them, making them smile, and getting them to learn. And now I have these 5 or 6 students who come into me who have a smile on their face, who love to learn, are not afraid to try things, do not see themselves any differently than the rest of the class. And one of those students, he's constantly chatting me on Gmail. Like, I could be on at 9 o'clock at night and he's like, hi. He's like, how's it going? It's awesome. What are you doing? You know, and he has a limited vocabulary, but it's just fun to see.
Yeah.
It's really exciting to see when you engage students like that. They're the most willing to do pretty much anything and then engage with you as a person. I think that was one of my best days, is when those kids come in and they light up with excitement.
Well, those kids are like the teachers. They're used to being classified down to that minnows beginner's level,
right? And
then constantly feeling like they have to somehow catch up.
Right, and they don't.
Because they have a level and they're getting better from that level, and that's the way it should be.
Yeah, it's really a great experience with those special ed students. Love them. Love them.
And it's funny. This is the 4th episode we've done. It's always about the human connection, and then it's about the content, and then it's about the tech, or whatever that extra piece is that you're adding onto it, which I think is becoming more and more important for people to understand that it really is more of that substance, that empathy piece to it, than anything else. Well, we appreciate those of you that are watching and those of you that will watch. We've been here with Scott Kinkoph from Brecksville-Broadview Heights School, talking about what it's like to be a teacher in a gradeless classroom and also to work with other teachers in your district. We appreciate you coming in, and we appreciate your district letting you come in as well. So we will get this up if you're not watching live, and it'll be on this afternoon at the latest, and you can watch to your heart's content. And we appreciate it. Scott, thanks again.
Thank you for having me.
And we will see you next time on Innovators in Education.